Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. We are really super happy that you were able to join us. I want to introduce the people who are going to be sharing with you today. The first person on the screen, you can see me. And then next to me, in wearing the sort of purpley glasses, that's Sulia Ricote. She's a preschool and kindergarten teacher, has been with us for very many years. And next to her, who also is a preschool and kindergarten teacher, is Miss Roshani Scott. Below on that deck there is Miss Andy, who teaches in the upper elementary program. And next to that is Miss Kathy Shirakawa, who's our program administrator, who has many, many years here at MCS and a leader in our Montessori program. Today, we're going to be talking about 5 core components of Montessori: trained Montessori teachers, the multi-age classroom, Montessori materials, child-directed work and freedom of movement and independence in a Montessori classroom, and also the very important uninterrupted work periods. And you can see there in that photo a picture of Dr. Maria Montessori early in the 20th century, sitting with children and sharing some material with them, and obviously very happy and pleased to be there with children that she did so much good work for. I'm going to be starting out with talking about trained Montessori teachers. So you may know that MCS is a member of the American Montessori Society, or AMS. AMS provides accreditation to hundreds of teacher training programs across the country, as well as accrediting Montessori schools like ours. Although Montessori schools from one to the other aren't affiliated in a legal way, we're all proponents of the Montessori approach, which was designed, as I mentioned a minute ago, by Dr. Maria Montessori in the early part of the 20th century. Montessori training is based on an understanding of early childhood and all development of children, often associated with a university or college program. Many Montessori teacher training centers are coupled with a master's in education. And most of our classroom teachers carry not just the Montessori credential along with their undergraduate degree, but also a master's degree in education. There's another major Montessori accrediting and training body, and that's the the Association Montessori International. And that's primarily teacher training that happens, came out of Europe, but there are teacher training centers for both AMI and AMS in the United States. And we have teachers who, some of whom are AMS and some of whom are AMI. Montessori teacher training takes place in training centers with certified Montessori teachers of teachers who also hold credentials. And it includes reading directly from the words of Dr. Montessori. She wrote a number of books. It involves a study of childhood development and an introduction to all the materials that we use to teach about our program. And you can see in those photos, those shelves there with lots of materials on them. Some people refer to them as toys, but they're really not at all toys. They're designed for teaching. Some of the materials teach math or geometry or science, but they're all designed for teaching. And you'll hear a little bit more about Montessori materials shortly. Teacher training takes about 2 years. The first year is usually devoted to coursework, a lot of reading, a lot of writing, a lot of observation. And the second year involves training in a classroom as an intern with a lead Montessori teacher who has been already teaching for several years. Teacher training happens by by developmental levels. So there's teacher training for infants and toddlers. We have one classroom here for 2-year-olds, preschool and kindergarten, which are 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and we have 4 of those here at MCS. Lower elementary training, which is 1st through 3rd grade, and we have 2 lower elementary classrooms here, and upper elementary, which is 4th through 6th grade. And we have one divided classroom for the 4th through 6th graders. We actually have a huge upper elementary classroom this year of 40 students, and we have 3 teachers in with them. And there are also teacher training centers for middle school and high school, but we don't offer either one of those at our school. One way to think about a Montessori classroom is kind of as a 3-legged stool. The first one is, the first leg of the stool is Montessori, or excuse me, yes, the Montessori teacher who is trained, as I just described. The second one is those materials that are designed and on the shelves for them to use for learning, teaching and learning. And then also the third leg is the students themselves. And so we consider a complete Montessori classroom as having all those 3 components. And unfortunately, as I said, you cannot be in the classrooms at this time, but hopefully one of these days you can join us and be in the classroom. You can see all those 3 things coming together. Because we are an accredited Montessori school, all of our teachers are credentialed. We provide professional development for our teachers, ongoing, even after they're credentialed, but we also provide funds for oftentimes assistants in our program who have developed an interest in Montessori, and we provide funds for them as well. And over the year, periodically, you'll hear about our fundraising efforts, and one of those goes toward providing funds for our teacher training, supporting our teachers to get their credentials.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the multi-age classroom. So all Montessori classrooms, except for toddler, are multi-age groups. And so these are typically ages 3 to 6 in the preschool level, ages 6 to 9 in lower elementary, and then ages 9 to 12 in upper elementary, and so on with middle school and high school. The purpose of these multi-age groups is to build responsibility as older students lead younger students through different activities, and the younger children can observe what the older children are doing, kind of encourages them to try and learn things, or later when they are learning it, they kind of remember seeing a classmate doing the same job. Older children might be the ideal assistant teacher for their peers because they just recently learned the subject themselves. And sometimes students are kind of take something differently from another child, another one of their friends. Multi-age groupings more closely mirror society when we're working with people of all different ages and interacting with individuals of different ages. And so this type of classroom arrangement provides for lots of different needs for children, and actually has been shown to have less peer-to-peer conflict or less conflict in the classroom. Since we know that all children and all individuals learn differently, a multi-age classroom can provide students who may be developmentally behind with not being labeled, or gives them confidence to kind of do their best work and be able to have that space to work at a slower pace or a faster pace. And oftentimes you kind of see, even in this picture, that classrooms take on like a family environment where the younger students are, kind of looking up to the older students as siblings, and it really helps with collaboration. So Dr. Maria Montessori developed these multi-ages through her own study of children, and also through her kind of discovery of the sensitive periods of learning. And this led to the 4 planes of development. So a sensitive period is what Maria Montessori referred to as a time when a child is most ready to learn a skill. So for example, when children are first born to about age 4, Maria Montessori described this time period as the absorbent mind. and children are rapidly taking in information from their surroundings. They're kind of mirroring the actions of those around them. And probably anyone who's been around a young child or had a young child or has a young child has seen how children kind of imitate those around them, be it their older siblings or sometimes the adult. And through this, she kind of developed these multi-age groupings and the materials and the setup of the classroom to appeal to what the child was most ready to learn. So the first plane of development, the preschool and toddler level, ages 0 to 6, is when children really have a strong desire for physical independence. And so Montessori practical life jobs help fulfill this desire, which will be spoken about later. And the preschool age is also a time when they really refine movement. So you can see there a child, learning to cut a banana, these kind of fine motor skills of washing, or even lots of the materials have knobs so that they're working on those fine motor skills that they'll need later for writing. By the elementary level, children have moved from the absorbent mind to the reasoning mind. And this is the second plane of development. And in this plane, children can think more abstractly, more logically. They become more philosophical, more imaginative, and they're much more interested in group work. So children are kind of focused on social relationships, learning about history, human culture, how the world works through tools and machines. And basically through this elementary level, the second plane of development, children are kind of trying to figure out what's my place in society. So, we try to, Montessori classrooms provide a lot of space for children of this age to work together, to mentor each other, to really dive deeper into subjects, history and science, especially through the use of timelines. I know the lower elementary is actually doing or has been doing a lot with timelines right now. And a lot of this is done through something called cosmic education. And this teaches about how the world's interconnected and how we all kind of work together. On the third plane, which we don't have the third plane at our school, but I'll speak a little bit about it, that's adolescence. And this plane focuses most on self-assessment and critical thinking. Adolescents have a strong desire for emotional independence, and they're really working on constructing their social self, wanting more control of their own life. And then the fourth and final plane, which is ages 18 to 24, focuses on financial independence, hopefully. So throughout this stage, the young adult is working to find their place within the world. And this is kind of the final stage of growth, where the child is growing into a contributing member of society. So the groupings, these multi-age groupings, are very purposeful. It provides a space not only for children to work on the development of themselves, but also on their problem-solving skills through group work, their leadership skills, their confidence, and their independence. This is one of the reasons that we strongly encourage children to complete each cycle, because we've seen the benefits in Montessori education when children have that final year and they can be the leaders, build that confidence, and then move on to their next level, their next plane of development.
Okay, so are we talking about Montessori materials? Montessori materials are hands-on learning tools that are designed to stimulate the children's minds and encourage exploration. The Montessori materials provide the children opportunities to discover key learning outcomes through repetition and practice. Dr. Maria Montessori said, "Nothing goes into the mind that does not first go through the hands." And that's exactly what Montessori materials help the child to do. Montessori materials are beautiful. They're simple to use, and they really call out to the child, saying, "Take me, work with me, touch me." And they're pleasing to look at. They feel good to the touch and feel good to all the senses of the children. These materials are expertly made with natural materials, wood, glass, etc. They're expensive, but of very high quality and that will last for many years in a classroom. The children are first introduced to Montessori materials by the trained teacher who will present them with a lesson. And then the children are invited to work with the materials independently. When they finish the activity, the children return the material to its allocated place in the classroom. And we call this finishing a work cycle in the Montessori classroom. There is one of each of the materials. So the children learn to wait for their turn and learn to be patient. Each material focuses and teaches one skill at a time, and they're intentionally designed to support independent learning. Montessori materials isolate one quality. If you look at this slide of the pink tower, the only difference is the size. They're all cubes and they are all pink. And that's the aim for the child, to discriminate size. Montessori materials are also designed to be self-correcting or some of them have a built-in control of error that is self-evident. This allows the child to see their own mistakes and discover concepts independently with repetition and practice. We all know too well that children don't like to be corrected, right? Or we all don't like to be corrected. Or they will say, no, I want to do it. For example, this very young child building the pink tower, she can see for herself that it goes from the largest to the smallest. And if she doesn't arrange the cubes in that way, it doesn't quite look right. So she will see it and be able to correct it herself. Or maybe a child working with the knob cylinders will see that they don't fit in the incorrect hole. And in math work, there may be too many or too few objects left over at the end of the activity. The buckle frame won't be held together if it hasn't been done right. Sometimes it takes time for the children to see it, or they don't see it right away. I have seen many children look at their work, think for some time, and then say, oh, I get it. And that's really great because it comes from within the child, and they're so happy to discover it themselves without having to be corrected. The Montessori materials are child size, so they're easy for the child to use, and we use real things like real food for cutting in practical life with child-sized knives. We first show them how to use them. For pouring activities, as 3-year-olds, the children pour from child-sized real glass or porcelain cups and jugs. It's really great to see a 3-year-old carrying an activity with glass cups, jugs so carefully with a total look of total concentration on their faces from the shelf to the table. The children know that if they drop them, they will break. So from a very young age, they learn to care for the materials. The Montessori materials encourage purposeful movement and exploration. This manipulative quality really helps children to develop their fine motor skills, encourage independence and concentration, and prepare children for real life. Montessori materials have direct aims and indirect aims. So if we look at the pink tower, the aim of this material is discrimination of size. Indirectly, later on in the elementary, they're going to use this knowledge of the pink tower when they're talking about cubing and other mathematical operations. But at preschool level, it's discrimination of size. The aim of the buckle frame is to teach the child how to buckle. Indirectly, the child is learning to be independent so that later on he can buckle his shoes or buckle his belt. It helps control his hands, and indirectly it prepares him for writing, to develop his fine motor skills, and that helps the child in so many ways. They learn to be precise, to get that tab right in that small hole. You need a lot of concentration. If you take another material in the classroom, called the binomial cube, the child at preschool level sees it as a puzzle with different cubes, prisms of different color and color combinations to explore, manipulate, and build it in a purely sensorial way. It provides mental stimulation and helps develop concentration, and the child works intently to solve the puzzle by constructing the cube. Later on in the elementary class, the child draws from the experience with the binomial cube in his work with algebraic functions. In the elementary class, the binomial cube is presented as a concrete representation of the algebraic formula. The Montessori materials are arranged within their curriculum area, and they're placed from left to right in progression order from the easiest activity to the hardest. This logical sequence provides the children a clear path as they progress through the multi-age classroom that Andy explained to you about. So they progress through the 3-year work cycle using these Montessori materials. Thank you.
It's about self-directed learning, freedom of movement, and independence. Self-directed learning is fundamental to Montessori education. Children make creative choices in their learning, and they take initiative in choosing the activities independently. In order for the children to be able to choose the activities, first, the teachers must present them the lessons. Then the children get a turn to work with the activity that has been presented to them. Once the children have learned the process, they then take the initiative in choosing the activities on their own. So self-directed learning empowers the children to make their own decisions as to which activity they will choose and work to learn the skills. Children become responsible and able to take control of their own choices and work responsibly with the guidance of the teachers. In self-directed learning, the children set some goals on what skills they would like to learn. They learn to prioritize which activity they will choose first. They engage in the learning process by working with the activity purposefully and productively. Finally, they complete a work cycle by replacing the activity back in its proper place. Completing a work cycle enables the children to develop many skills such as sense of order, concentration, coordination, and independence. Freedom of movement is also fundamental to our Montessori education. It is the freedom within limits the teacher sets forth that helps the child succeed. There are 3 basic freedoms in our Montessori classroom. The first freedom is the freedom to move. The children are free to move about the classroom as they wish. However, they may not distract or interrupt a child who is working. The children should be respectful of their peers and classmates who are working in their individual activities. They learn to quietly and carefully walk around someone's floor mat or workspace, as well as use their indoor voice in the classroom. By doing so, children develop grace and courtesy, which is important in learning what it means to be polite and respectful. The second freedom is the freedom to choose. The materials in our Montessori classroom spark the interest of the children and are inviting for the children to take them off the shelves. The child can choose any work they would like to do in the classroom, as long as they have been given lessons on how to do the activity. The children may not take the work off of the shelf until the activities have been introduced and shown to them by the teacher. This way, the children will be able to work with the materials purposefully and productively. The third freedom is the freedom of repetition. When the teacher introduced a new activity to the children, they are encouraged to repeat the work until they have achieved mastery of the skills from that particular activity. The value of repetition is of utmost importance to our Montessori education. Repetition provides the practice that children need to master the new skills. It makes them feel comfortable to work with the activity. It builds their confidence and strengthens their memory skills. So repetition in our Montessori in learning environment is very important. Now the independence. By giving a child the ability to make their own choices, providing guidance and allowing them to learn at their own pace, the children will make their own choices and discover the world around them. Giving them this opportunity will make them feel confident and responsible being who will care about others, their friends, and other members of their community. We, the teachers, carefully prepare the classroom environment so that all choices are safe and inviting, and children are free to explore within boundaries. What this means is there's freedom within limits, which is a hallmark of Montessori education, which means that the children are capable of learning and doing things independently, provided they were given lessons on the activities that they were choosing to do. They always have clear expectations and ground rules in place to guide them in making sound choices. So here's a famous quote by Maria Montessori to develop the children's independence. Never help a child with a task at which he feels he can succeed. So if you see in our preschool level, if you see the children are learning to put on their own shoes, it is important that we have to kind of step back and let them do it, because the more that they do it, they become more proficient in doing the skills. In our 3 to 6 program, the children enjoy choosing the activities from the different learning areas, and they can only choose one activity at a time. Each child has a workspace represented by the floor mat or a table mat. They learn to keep pieces of their activities on their workspace, and they take responsibility in cleaning up and putting their things away after they're done working with the activity. The elementary students take this to another level. They have a weekly work plan as a basis of their work choices. They set weekly goals, learn to manage their time, and prioritize their work, which they ultimately need to complete by the end of the week. They must meet certain academic expectations. Teachers use a variety of tools to help students work independently while still meeting their goals, including work plans and time management skills. Students become more interested in research and are given ample opportunity to deeply explore topics of their choice. Miss Andy can explain a little bit more about about the work plan and assignments in lower elementary and upper elementary.
Yeah, so Carrie has a few pictures of some examples. So basically in lower elementary, this is an upper elementary example, but here's a lower elementary example. So in lower elementary, they have goals for each week, and then they are expected, then they have jobs for each week, and they're expected to complete their jobs by Friday. And so they check in with the teachers on Friday. Sometimes they have to do a little recess work if they don't finish the jobs that they needed to finish. But the goals are just kind of to help them. Like you can see here, my goal is to do 4 jobs every day. So that's really their goal. The teacher has things that they've set out that the child will need to work on to make sure that they're meeting the things that they need to meet. But then the children can set their own goals and choose some of their own jobs too, to kind of find a balance with that independence. And then it's really consistent from week to week to make sure that the child has those things done by Friday. When they get to upper elementary and the child is becoming more independent for their own materials and their own things, we have jobs that are due on different days. And so, for example, they may have a job that's due on Wednesday, And it's very consistent, like science will always be due on Wednesday, and history will always be due on Thursday, just for example. But it helps the child kind of manage time a little bit more and prioritize their work, like Sulia said. So you'll see there in that planner that some of the jobs have like a 1 or a 2 or 3 or 4 next to them. And that's where the child has prioritized what they need to do first. So maybe the job that's due first, then that's their first priority. And the job that's second, that's their second priority, and so on. So we really try to help the child as they become older and move into the next level, that they can really continue to develop their organization skills and their independence, so that will help them be successful for the next middle school and then later on in life.
So to understand what we talk about when we're talking about the uninterrupted work cycle, I think we still need to understand a little bit about the prepared environment, what we call the prepared environment. So I'm going to actually insert that a little bit first. You might hear that quite often when we talk about the prepared environment. And what does that mean? It means an environment that the teacher prepares and sets up for the child. And so when you walk into the classroom, you'll see areas of the classroom, the sensorial area, the math area, the language area, the practical life area. And in each of those areas, you'll have the array of materials that Ms. Sulia was talking about. So that allows the child to work independently because they choose those activities on their own. Okay, so now we go into the uninterrupted work cycle. With the materials set out for them and the freedom for them to choose on their own, the children have a very important uninterrupted work period. Dr. Maria Montessori discovered that children, when left to their own devices, with a careful balance of freedom and responsibility, displayed a distinct 3-hour cycle of work. And we see this in the classroom over and over again. In the Montessori classroom, at all age levels, an extended work period free of interruptions by the adults in the program offers children the opportunity to work at their own pace. The uninterrupted work period is vitally important, as that is when the building of coordination, concentration, independence, and order, and the assimilation of information are able to occur. So when we talk about who's interrupting the child, we really mean, like we said, the adult. So in a traditional program, which is very teacher directed, the teacher is the one to direct the child's work. We are all familiar, most of us, if we haven't grown up in a Montessori environment, that we have a math period and everyone is doing math at the same time, or an art period when we're all working on the same art project at the same time. In a Montessori classroom, when you walk in, you'll see children working at very many different tasks all at the same time. Even in an elementary program, you might walk in and see a child working on math while a small group lesson is being given on reading, and still others are having a snack break. And so they have that freedom to choose their work at their own pace and at their own time. Compare that to what some schools and what some educational programs have been trying to develop, similar in nature to Montessori, what they call the block schedules. And you might have heard that or might have experienced that. The block schedules are very different actually from the Montessori uninterrupted work period, where the children in a Montessori classroom are working at many different tasks at the same time. The block periods do have long periods of work time, but they're working with the same topic, the same subject. So they may have a 3-hour work period of math, for example, one stretch at a time. In a Montessori classroom, the children have the freedom to move from a math activity. When they're done, they move on to another one, a reading activity, or they may go into a quiet corner and read some books, or take out a matching activity or a puzzle map. As you see here in these slides, the pictures that Carrie has taken. So it's very different because the children are the ones to make these choices. So they explore the prepared environment and they engage with those materials of their own choosing. Again, developing independence, which is a very, very important component of a Montessori program. This time is meant to give them opportunities to enjoy the work that they love while also cultivating basic life skills. that preparation for life. While the work will look different for each age group, at all program levels, the children have ample time allotted for the uninterrupted work period, and that allows the children to develop such important work habits as self-direction, independence, time management, and it fosters a deep concentration. As parents and as adults, we tend to insert ourselves into a child's work period. We may come across a child working really intently on a piece of art that they're working. And it's just really hard for us to control ourselves and say, wow, that looks great. What are you doing? And you might have noticed the child will look up at you and there goes that opportunity because their concentration is broken. So in a Montessori classroom, the teacher's role is to really have their presence felt as lightly as possible. We may watch a child and observe them, but we really follow their lead. If they need help, they know how to ask for it. You may have your child in the preschool level coming home and you might notice that they have been putting their hand on your shoulder or on your hip. And you might wonder, what is that all about? And that's because it's a skill that they've learned in the classroom at the preschool level, that if they want the teacher's attention, that they come up to them. And if the teacher's working with another child, they'll put their hand on the teacher's shoulder. And the teacher will then put their hand on the child's hand, indicating that they know that they're there and that they're waiting. So the child doesn't come up to them and, teacher, Miss Sulia, with a question. They'll just wait patiently for Miss Sulia to acknowledge that they know that they're there and that she'll get to them next. At the 2-year-old level, a typical morning work cycle can vary from 1 to 1.5 hours. So it's very age appropriate. We don't have them working for 3 straight hours. Children of this age tend to explore materials and the teachers observe or quietly move through the room, assisting or redirecting as needed. There's a lot more observation at this level. During the preschool and kindergarten work period, teachers observe the behaviors of the children and invite individuals in small groups to short lessons when they see opportunities to assist a child's progress. Optimally, the majority of each morning and afternoon is devoted to self-motivated work. That's the work period that we say in the morning. And that is the busiest time of their morning. So when parents have told us that, well, my child doesn't take a nap, they are often surprised to learn that their child has had a very good long nap at school. And that's because the work that they do, maybe not long or difficult, but it is so focused and there's a lot of concentration. It takes a lot out of them. So they very often do need a nap in the afternoon and they recharge and go into the rest of the day refreshed. And we even take breaks at the elementary level too. After lunch, there's PE and then they work in the afternoon. At the elementary level, the work includes Montessori hands-on materials as well as increasingly abstract, developmentally appropriate lessons. There's a longer work period in the elementary program. That's one of the reasons we begin earlier in the day at 8 o'clock. And their work period goes all the way until 11 o'clock. Now, it's not just classroom work throughout that whole time. We do take breaks. We have snack breaks. We have water breaks. During this pandemic, we have mask breaks, which the child can step out of the classroom if they want to, take off their mask, get a drink of water, but then they go back into the classroom to be masked with their peers. The teachers during this time work with the students individually and in small groups. So like I mentioned earlier, you might see the teachers giving small group lessons while other children are working independently. They collaborate as they work on tasks, that peer learning, or they work on research projects together. They manage their work expectations with their work plans. And as Andy just demonstrated, that time management that they develop from their work plans also goes along with the uninterrupted work period because they do not need the teacher to tell them what to do. They look at their work plans and the work plan tells them, okay, I've completed my reading activity. Now what can I do next? They have an array of activities to choose from, which they know that they must complete by the end of a certain period. But then it is their choice to move on to the next activity, knowing that they have to complete it by the end of a certain time. And it's the same thing with the preschool children, that they look around the classroom and they see all these wonderful activities, just inviting them to touch them and play with them. As Sulia mentioned, They can work with them on their own as frequently as they want to, as long as they have been given an introductory lesson, and that's so that they know how to use it properly. So there are periods during this long uninterrupted work period that we notice, or Maria Montessori has identified as periods of what we call false fatigue. And that's the period when a child will come up to the teacher and just kind of wander around the classroom. I don't know what to do. And that really is often a very brief period. And the child, is just getting over a little bit of a hump, needing some direction about a new activity that they can choose. And once they get over that brief period, then they go back to their work and you see them just refreshed and ready to keep working through that morning work period. So it looks like they're tired and it looks like they're done for the morning, but once we help them through that period, they continue working with a lot of energy throughout that morning period. One final thing that I wanted to mention is that protecting the uninterrupted work period is very important, because each child deserves the opportunity to fully engross themselves in the work that captivates them. And therefore, a late arrival to the class not only takes away from that child's experience, but also disrupts the other children as well. So that's why we really talk about the importance of timely arrival in school at every level, even with the 2-year-old program. So the first aim of the prepared environment and also the uninterrupted work period, therefore, is, as far as possible, to render the growing child independent of the adult. And if they are independent, then our work is done.